Everything happens for a reason. A journey through Buddhist wisdom. The question that changed my life. It all began on a quiet morning in early spring. The cherry blossoms had just begun to bloom outside my window. A gentle reminder that life moves forward, regardless of our desires or struggles. But inside my heart, there was no peace. I had just lost my job. A relationship I thought would last had ended, and my savings were dwindling. The future seemed uncertain, and I was overwhelmed by questions. Why was this happening to me? What had I done to deserve this? I turned to the one place where I had always found some comfort: books. In my small apartment, tucked between well-worn novels and old journals, was a dusty copy of the Dhammapada. I hadn't touched it in years. That day, for reasons I couldn't explain, I opened it. And there it was. One simple sentence that stopped my thoughts like a bell ringing in the silence. Nothing happens without a cause. Everything arises from conditions. This was the beginning of my journey to understanding that everything truly does happen for a reason, not in a fatalistic way, but in a deeply interconnected, karmic way. The nature of suffering. In the days that followed, I began reading more, learning more. Buddhism does not shy away from the truth of suffering. In fact, it begins with it. The first noble truth is clear. Life is suffering. But the Buddha did not stop there. He taught that suffering arises from causes: attachment, craving, ignorance, and if suffering has a cause, then it also has an end. This insight changed me. I stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What conditions led me here?" I remembered the choices I had made, the times I ignored red flags, the jobs I stayed in out of fear, the relationships I clung to even when they were draining me. None of it was punishment. It was simply cause and effect. Karma, not as some mystical force, but as a chain of actions and results. And most importantly, I learned this. I was not powerless. Meeting the monk. One afternoon, still full of questions, I visited a small Buddhist temple tucked away on the edge of the city. The smell of incense, the quiet chanting, and the golden statue of the Buddha created an atmosphere of stillness I had not felt in months. There, I met a monk named Venerable Saman. His presence was like the still surface of a deep lake. We spoke briefly, and then he said, "Come back tomorrow. Let's talk." And so began a series of conversations that would slowly transform my understanding of life. Conversations on karma. Over many weeks, Venerable Saman shared stories from the Buddha's teachings, and we explored them together. One day, I asked him directly, "Do you really believe everything happens for a reason?" He smiled and replied, "I believe everything happens because of conditions. That is not the same as saying there is one reason. There are many causes behind every moment. But yes, there is no effect without a cause." He told me the story of a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors said, "Such bad luck." The farmer simply said, "Maybe, later." The horse returned with wild horses. "Good luck," they said. Again, he said, "Maybe." His son broke his leg taming one of them. "Terrible luck," they cried. "Maybe." he said again. Then soldiers came to draft young men for war but passed over his injured son. Venerable Saman looked at me and said, "You see, we don't always understand the full picture. But every event has consequences, some immediate, some far away." The Web of Interdependence. As I learned more, I began to see how connected everything was. The job I lost had forced me to slow down, reflect, and find a new path. The relationship that ended had opened space for growth. My suffering was not meaningless, it was a teacher. Buddhism teaches pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. Nothing exists on its own. Just as a plant needs soil, water, and sunlight to grow, every experience in our life arises from countless conditions. This understanding brought me peace. I no longer saw events as random. I saw them as part of a vast, unfolding tapestry of cause and effect. Acceptance and letting go. One of the hardest lessons was letting go of the past, of blame, of the illusion of control. Venerable Saman taught me the power of acceptance, not as resignation, but as wisdom. Accept what is, he said, so you can work skillfully with it. Fighting the present only creates more suffering. I began meditating daily, watching my thoughts without clinging to them. I learned to let go of stories that no longer served me. The story of being a victim, the story of being a failure. I replaced them with presence. Everything that had happened had brought me here. It had made me wiser, kinder, more aware. The story of the Lotus. One evening, during a talk, Venerable Saman shared a metaphor that stayed with me. The lotus grows in muddy water, yet it blossoms pure and untouched by the mud. Our suffering, our confusion, our heartbreak, these are the mud. But from them, something beautiful can emerge, not in spite of them, but because of them. That night, I cried, not from sadness, but from recognition. My pain had meaning, my past had purpose, not because someone planned it that way, but because I could use it to grow. A new way of living. Months passed. I no longer asked why things happened. Instead, I asked, what can I learn from this? I stopped judging events as good or bad. I saw them as teachers. When something went wrong, I looked for the lesson. When something went right, I expressed gratitude. I began volunteering at the temple, helping with translations, guiding new visitors. I no longer felt alone. I was part of something larger. And slowly, without trying to fix everything, my life began to change. Sharing the wisdom. Now, when friends come to me in pain, I don't try to fix their problems. I listen. I share what I've learned. I tell them, everything that happens carries a message. Not a punishment, not a reward, but an invitation to grow. Sometimes they understand, sometimes they don't, but I trust the seed is planted, just as it was for me. Full circle. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened, the job loss, the heartbreak, the loneliness. Without them, I would never have asked deeper questions. I would never have opened that old book. I would never have met Venerable Saman. Life does not unfold according to our desires, but it unfolds according to causes. And in that unfolding, there is wisdom, if we choose to see it. Closing reflections. The present moment. As I sit now under the same cherry blossom tree that once witnessed my confusion, I understand something deeply. Everything happens for a reason, not because the universe has a plan, but because the universe has laws. The law of cause and effect, the law of impermanence, the law of interdependence. And within those laws, we find freedom, the freedom to choose our response, the freedom to learn, the freedom to grow. This is the wisdom of the Buddha, not to escape life, but to understand it. And in understanding, to find peace.